Ladies and gentlemen, welcome and happy Constitution Day. I am Jeffrey Rosen, the president of this wonderful institution, the National Constitution Center. The National Constitution Center has an inspiring charter from Congress to disseminate information about the US Constitution on a nonpartisan basis. And this is the most exciting and important day of the year for us. And out of all of the days that have enthralled me and our great colleagues and helped to advance constitutional education since I got here 2 years ago, I think this is the most significant, because today we are launching a new tool, the interactive Constitution, that has the power and the potential to transform constitutional education and dialogue in America. Before I tell you about that tool, I want to begin appropriately by welcoming the great kids from Roman Catholic High School, and we're going to begin with a preamble challenge. We're going to read the preamble to the United States Constitution, and I can now find it on the Interactive Constitution homepage, which is so exciting, and we're going to go right to the beginning of it, and here we click on We the People, and I know our students can do it by heart, but let's, together with them, recite the preamble to the United States Constitution. We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Great job, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you very much indeed. I'm thrilled to announce our partners in this extraordinary enterprise, without whom it would not have been possible. This beautiful interactive Constitution is made possible thanks to a very generous grant from the John Templeton Foundation. Daniel Green from the Templeton Foundation has been just a visionary partner from the beginning. Please join me in thanking the John Templeton Foundation for making this possible. I'm also so thrilled to have representatives from the two partner organizations that supervised this great project and made it possible. Just to tell you about the genesis of the Interactive Constitution, when I came here, I thought that it would be important and useful for constitutional education to bring together the leading lawyers' organizations in the United States of different perspectives. And those are the Federalist Society and the American Constitution Society. And these great groups, which approach the Constitution from a different perspective, agreed to co-chair a scholarly advisory board to supervise the interactive Constitution. And with their help, they nominated scholars to write about every clause of the Constitution, describing both what the scholars agreed about and disagreed about. And the people who made that possible are the co-chairs of our great scholarly advisory board, are my dear friend and colleague, Lee Otis, who's vice chairman of the Federalist Society. Thank you so much, Lee. I'm just so happy to share this wonderful day with you.
Thank you very much. It's been a great pleasure.
I'm so glad you're here. And Lee's great co-chair is the president of the American Constitution Society, Carolyn Fredrickson. She's been a superb partner. She was not able to be here today, but she sent her incredible and dynamic colleague, Kara Stein, who's worked so closely with us. And Kara, this wouldn't have been possible without you. Thank you so much, Kara Stein. Thank you. I also need, at this moment, to acknowledge my colleague, without whom this would not have been possible. You're nodding because you know what an extraordinary job was done by Danielle Evans, Senior Fellow for Constitutional Studies. Thank you very, very much, Danielle. And in addition to our great partners at the Federalist Society and the American Constitution Society, I couldn't be more excited to be able to introduce you in just a moment to the visionary head of the College Board, David Coleman, who, because of his passionate devotion to education about the founding documents and bringing them to every student in America, has become our partner and is going to help make this great tool the centerpiece of the new AP History and Government exams. I'm going to introduce David properly in a moment, but first I want you to join me in giving him an enthusiastic round of applause. Okay, so let's now engage with the interactive Constitution. I tried this out last night live on C-SPAN. It actually worked. I was so excited. And I just can't wait to show it to you. So let's begin on the homepage, which, as we know, thanks to our wonderful web access, is always great. We start with the About the Constitution, and here are thrilling papers about its significance and meaning, written by Rick Beeman, the leading historian of the founding era, Steve Calabresi, the founder of the Federalist Society, about originalism, Robert Post, the dean of Yale Law School, and Reva Siegel from Yale about democratic constitutionalism. So you can see the two different leading perspectives about the way that scholars and judges interpret the Constitution. And then there's an unusually penetrating and brilliant essay by me and David Rubenstein. I'm kidding, of course. This is a pamphlet about the relation between the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights that we hope will introduce students to its significance. And then you, on your computer or mobile device or tablet, can click on any provision right now of the first 15 amendments to the Bill of Rights, because those are the ones we're launching today, and see the best scholars in America, nominated by the Federalist Society and the American Constitution Society, writing about them. So let's begin with the Second Amendment, the most controversial in the bunch. You'd think that there's no way that people of different perspectives could agree about it. But here are the two leading scholars of the Second Amendment, Nelson Lund and Adam Winkler, agreeing on a common statement about the uncontested history and meaning. There's something beautiful about this, and students who read this can have confidence that this is content about which scholars of different perspectives agree. And they said that many people in the founding generation believed governments are prone to use soldiers to oppress the people. They talked about the fear of standing armies displacing state militias. They talked about the Constitutional Convention's decision to establish peacetime standing armies to regulate the militia. But they disagree about whether the Second Amendment was an individual or a collective right. So after you've read about the common areas of agreement, you can scroll down to the bottom and read about matters of debate. And here you'll see Nelson Lund saying that it's not a second-class right and that the right to keep and bear arms is an individual liberty that needs to be strictly protected, and Adam Winkler insisting that historically it was a collective right. Remarkably, and this is another really exciting thing about the project of trying to find agreement, both scholars agree that many of the regulations that are currently being debated would have been approved of by the founders. So although they disagree profoundly about the historic sources of the Second Amendment, they agree about its some of its contemporary applications. But that's not all. After having engaged and learned from this exchange between the scholars about the Second Amendment, you can then look at its historical roots, because there's a second part of the interactive Constitution that allows you to explore both the historic sources of the Bill of Rights and also the spread of that liberty across the globe. So we go to Writing Rights, and we want to start exploring it, and we choose an amendment, and it's the Second Amendment. And now students can decide for themselves whether the Second Amendment was an individual or a collective right. So they can look at the Revolutionary era state constitutions that were the source for the Second Amendment, and they'll find that many of those constitutions, such as New York, talk about a concern about regulating standing armies and making sure that they're not displaced by, that state militias are not displaced by standing armies. And it talks about the need for those standing armies not to be displaced. But you can then also click on a different provision, like the Pennsylvania Constitution, and here you'll find the Pennsylvania minority statement saying the people have a right to bear arms for the defense of themselves or for purposes of killing game. So in Pennsylvania, at least in the minority's view, it clearly was an individual right. New York seemed to view it more of a collective right. Students can be encouraged to actually scroll through the various provisions, and they can count them up, they can decide for themselves, they can watch the evolution of the language from Madison's first draft, which began by declaring the right of the people to keep and bear arms and had the well-regulated militia second, to the final draft of the Second Amendment, which talks about the well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. So this is just an incredible teaching tool, and there's no limit to the way that an engaged student can begin to click, to follow the links, to compare the text. You see that 68% of the original language in Madison's proposal and the final text matched. And this is why David Coleman and I believe that this tool will be useful not only for the teaching of history and government, but also for English language arts, because it really teaches close textual analysis, attention to language, and a respect for the evolution of language and the notion that every word counts. But that's not all. After having first heard the greatest scholars in the country debate the Second Amendment, then after having explored its historical roots, you can then trace the influence of that provision around the world. So we now have this beautiful globe, and we want to find the part of it that protects the right to keep and bear arms, and we are hoping that it is scaling on mobile a little more easily. Here it is, the right to keep and bear arms is right here. And here are the countries in the world that actually have provisions respecting gun rights. You see how few there are, in fact, because they're in yellow, and one of them is Iran. And we'll look at the Iranian constitution and see that in accordance with the Quranic verse, prepare against whomever, prepare them whatever force you're able to muster, and horses ready for battle, striking fear into God's enemy. And then there's a notion that the government is obliged to provide military training, and some more. The possession of arms requires the granting of permission by the competent authorities. Interesting. So already I want to learn more about how that's applied in Iran, how it's regulated, and that'll encourage more study as well. Justice Breyer will be here today. He's going to talk about his new book about the Constitution and the world. He's convinced that in an increasingly interdependent world, it's relevant to look at other constitutions. Justice Scalia vigorously disagrees, and that's a debate you can learn about on the Interactive Constitution. But how useful, how exciting for students to be able both to read about that methodological debate and also be able to click around and make up their own minds. There's one comparative party trick that I like to show because it's so striking. The collection of evidence is prohibited by the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution, which protects the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures. When General Douglas MacArthur wrote the Japanese Constitution after World War II, he cut and pasted the American Fourth Amendment almost word for word. So if you click on Japan, you'll see that 53% of the text matches the right of the people to be secure in their homes, papers, and effects against entries, searches, and seizures shall not be impaired except upon warrant for probable cause. By contrast, if you click on the, say, the Russian Constitution, it's a kind of creepy prohibition against spouses testifying against each other. Only 3% of the words matches. It looks nothing like our beautiful Fourth Amendment. Boy, you can see that this is just a remarkable tool. And I want to, I'm going to turn it over to David Coleman, but I just want to return to the mother page, which is the Interactive Constitution itself, and stress the excellence of the scholars who are writing about these amendments. If you look at the First Amendment, you will see Michael McConnell and Marcy Hamilton, Jeffrey Stone and Eugene Volokh, John Annoucing and Bert Newborn. This is remarkable. It's so incredible what Kara and Carolyn and Lee did. They nominated their top choices to write about the Bill of Rights, and almost all of the scholars said yes. And these, again, these are scholars who have very vigorously disagreed with each other in public. The fact that they were able quickly to come to agreement about the common language and meaning is a testament to how much about the Constitution unites us. This is the one document that binds us as Americans, and although we may sometimes debate its meaning, we are united by our conviction of its significance, its centrality to who we are as Americans. And that's why it's so consistent with the nonpartisan mission of the Constitution Center and the College Board to be putting it front and center. So that's the Interactive Constitution. I can't wait for the great students who read our preamble challenge to try it out. Is there any question, any amendment you're interested in learning about that I can click on? I remember I'm a law professor, so I always call on people who are in the front row. It's a very dangerous place to sit. The 10th. I won't do pop quizzes. Let's go look at the 10th and see what our scholars said about it. The other thing is all of these have very impressive artistic renditions of the amendment. So for some reason, the 10th Amendment is represented by socialist workers who seems to be denouncing the capitalist state. I'm not exactly sure why that was the case, but no doubt it was well chosen. Gary Lawson and Robert Shapiro. Gosh, you have to be a law professor to really get excited by the names here, because these are, law students are groupies of these people. And Gary Lawson has done more to, I think, transform understanding of the 10th Amendment and argue for its contemporary significance than anyone else. Robert Shapiro, the dean of Emory Law School, who takes a more traditional view. But first, we obviously want to read the 10th Amendment. The power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited to it by the states, and reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. So what does that sound like? What's the basic idea that it's protecting? I'm so sorry that you sat in the front row, because you thought you were just going to have to read the preamble, but the power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution. States can have rights too. That's a great way of putting it. If a power is not delegated to the United States or prohibited by the states, then it's reserved to the states or to the people. Now, this question of what it means for states to have rights, and whether it's the states that have rights themselves as sovereign bodies, as was believed during the Articles of Confederation, or whether it's we the people of each of the states who are sovereign, or whether, as James Wilson believed, we the people of the United States as a whole are sovereign, is a debate that's engaged in this paper. And you'll see Professors Lawson and Shapiro both agreeing about the central concern about the original Constitution, which is that the Articles of Confederation was too weak when you had totally sovereign states that had the ability to veto any proposed act, and you needed unanimous agreement. You couldn't have an army, you couldn't raise taxes. We needed a stronger Constitution. At the same time, they didn't want a Constitution of unlimited powers. Some powers were reserved to the states or the people, but the question of what those powers were and how strong the state should be continues to be a matter of debate. So that was a great question. After the show, go click on it. Just read the common statement, read the separate statements, and see who convinces you. It's now time. My great colleagues are reminding me that every class has to have its limits. And let me just say, rather than reading his formal bio, I just want to tell you how lucky I was to meet David Coleman and how impressed I am for what he's doing for education in America and civic discourse in America. He really is a visionary, and at a time of intense polarization, at a time of disagreement about what students should learn, he has a clear-eyed sense that the founding documents are central to what it means to be an educated citizen, that they should be a central part both of the SAT and the AP exams. He's pursuing this vision with great deftness and grace in the face of obvious shoals that await him at every turn. And his decision to be a partner of the National Constitution Center and to help us get this great tool to every student in America is one of the great partnerships and most fortunate collaborations that I've experienced. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming David Coleman.
It's moving to be in the city of brotherly love on Constitution Day and to talk about this. And so I'll say first, the College Board is committed to sharing this tool far and wide. What do I mean by that? Founding documents and the great conversation of human liberty and dignity that they inspire resonate throughout our AP US History course, throughout the upcoming AP Government course, and perhaps most surprisingly of all, I don't know how many of you know this, we made a fairly bold decision last year when we announced the redesign of the SAT itself. You've heard of that little-known exam? You're not supposed to tell people what's on the SAT, right? The whole point is it's the great secret. So we made a surprising decision. We told all students in America that they can know that 1 out of the 5 passages that you will study on an SAT, you will encounter on an SAT going forward, 1 of 5 will always be either a founding document of this country or the great global conversation of liberty and human dignity that inspires. Yeah, that's good news. We can applaud that. It is my sincere hope that we can replace dreary test preparation books with kids reading Lincoln and King and considering these documents, but also the language that they inspire, the language they inspire here in this country and, frankly, elsewhere. It is a strange thing. Why would you say it should be on the SAT? How could it be so important? What the SAT should measure at its finest is not obscure language that you are likely not to use again. That is what you'd call an SAT word. That's not its purpose. What instead the SAT should measure are the few things that are so valuable to know by heart that you will use them over and over again. Does that make sense? In other words, why practice something a lot unless you're going to use it a lot, unless it's going to change your life for the better? And I would submit to you that there is no single set of documents that gives a person more power in their life to participate in the conversations of college or the workplace, and of course civic life, than a knowledge of this document, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration, and the conversation it inspires. It would have been hard to follow last night's debate without knowing what the 10th Amendment was and what it stood for, so I'm delighted that you encountered it this morning. When you see on the revised SAT, on the new SAT, you'll see a sample item of Barbara Jordan. Barbara Jordan was an African American from Texas, and you can sense, as she claims her position in Texas, that there's a kind of wondering about her qualifications. Does she belong in this club that she's just joined? And I know many of you know the remarkable moment when she rose during the impeachment trial of Nixon, and she gave a speech where she begins, "I am an inquisitor." And Barbara Jordan, in that moment and in that speech, displays a command of the Federalist Papers and the Constitution that held her fellow lawmakers in awe. She claimed that power by her knowledge. That happens again and again. So that's now a sample passage on the SAT is her speech. Another, I'm giving away all the secrets, kids, so just keep listening. On the SAT, we have paired passages. Sounds pretty dreary. But we released a sample item of the debate, the implied debate looking side by side at Edmund Burke and Thomas Paine. Sounds like something worth reading. Sounds like something worth practicing. It won't only be present on the SAT, but every PSAT. In other words, the vision of the College Board is that students gradually, you don't like get it all at once, right? In other words, you prepare and you can take PSAT beginning 8th, 9th grade, later in 11th grade, and on every one, every time you take it, you'll encounter the founding documents and the great conversation that they inspire. Then again on SAT. Things that really matter are actually worth practicing over and over again. It's about time, it seems to me, in education, we dared to say there are a few things, you can't say this of everything, that deserve a kind of reverence and attention that are special. Because if we don't dare to do that, nothing is special, and nothing is known well by heart. So we, the College Board, will share this throughout the AP teaching community, but much more broadly. We'll share this throughout the teachers that are partners in high schools and middle schools throughout our work. We will do this in deepening ways. We recently hosted Jeff at our AP annual conference, and already in response, the superintendent of Gwinnett County in Georgia, the largest county in Georgia, has distributed it to all of his teachers. These words can have a presence in every classroom in America, and a mighty one. And we're entirely supportive of that, and we'll do that for years to come. Why, though, am I excited about the interactive Constitution? You know, people often ask me about what do I think about the role of technology in education. And they think, for some reason, that I'm going to respond extremely enthusiastically. Everyone is so excited that technology can transform education, make it so much better, which is possible, but let me offer you a cautionary note. In my mind, the technology of interruption has outpaced the technology of concentration. This is a serious threat to education. And for all the students here, I want you to consider that as exciting as multitasking can be, or jumping from thing to thing, most meaningful education requires solitude and sustained concentration, and then building on that collaboration with the hard-won fruits of your careful work. It isn't fast. So this technology, the interactive Constitution, is one of the first technologies I've seen that doesn't interrupt you. It deepens. It invites you to a deepening consideration over time, a layering that invites you to pay attention, to stop everything else and dare to go more deeply into the language. Why does that matter so much? Not only for the civic heritage of this country, But many of you may know, reading scores in this country after 8th grade have been flat for approximately 40 years. ACT and SAT scores in literacy are flat or declining, depending on how you look at them. This is not good news for America. What it shows is students lack the capacity to read increasingly dense text and make sense of it, to analyze it with care. If you can't do that, you're stuck, right? Because you go to college and you can't read at a college level, everything is not open to you, right? You're stuck. You know those kids, right, who try to fake it through class. They try to make it through, but they don't have the confidence to consume knowledge themselves. This interactive constitution cultivates that power, cultivates that sustained attention and ability to read word by word and to unveil it over time. I want to admit that I resonate with the interactive constitution on an even deeper level. To me, it reflects something about justice and liberty. It is just because it says an interesting thing. It says if you know these few phrases in depth, whatever money you have, whatever else is true about your life, if you master just this, it advances you. It's a very interesting proposition. It, to me, is also deeply about liberty. To know these rights is in part to protect them. To know them in yourself is to be able as a citizen to insist on them at any moment. Do you know what I'm saying? When someone is going to rob you of your rights, they very rarely warn you in advance. You are much safer, your liberty is much safer if you know them, if you hold them in yourself. And if I may go a bit deeper, I think that in all the great traditions of faith, there's part of reading that is something called reverence. What I mean by that is not just reading something over, but daring to respect it, daring to know it by heart, daring to be curious about it. In Judaism, there is a very interesting phrase that some people take very literally. I'll remind you of it. It says, "Fix these words of mine in your hearts." This is from Deuteronomy. "And minds, tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads." You may have seen some Orthodox Jews who take this so seriously, they literally lay tefillin and wrap the scripture around their hands and in their minds. In America, we are all free to believe or not believe. But that doesn't mean that the cultivation of reverence isn't powerful for each and every person. To be able to read reverently, whether or not you agree with what is said, but to pay that kind of powerful attention is, in my judgment, an achievement of the soul that is lasting. It allows you to experience all art more powerfully. No artist who makes something, what they really want from you is not your opinion about the art that you see. They want you to observe it with reverence. They want you to honor it with the care that it took to make it. I hope this work of the Interactive Constitution can give students a sense, and people a sense, of what's at stake in each choice of a word. In making and building those choices, the artistry of it, the craft of it, might inspire in you a desire to make something of similar craft yourself. And that's why I'm so proud to represent my team at the College Board. Unusually here with me is my Chief Administrative Officer, Peter Schwartz, who is himself a lawyer and a man of faith. But to me, while not all, to be clear, while not all lawyers are fine people, some of the finest people I know are lawyers. And that is equally true of Jeff. This is a time in our country where there is a principled despair about our ability to have a sane conversation about just about anything. And there are many reasons to worry about that. But I have found in Jeff a reason for hope. This kind of thing, my friends, does not happen by accident. The fact that he has pulled together such diverse perspectives to work together is a matter of enormous craft and care. It is not an accident. The fact that everything you read, have you noticed it while you're watching, is simply and well written. This is not just for AP level students. This is for all students. This work is clear, it is compelling, and that is the work of a fine mind. Him and his team have built those skills of writing well, thinking well, doing well, that have led to what I think is a masterwork, and I congratulate them and him. So thank you for your time and attention, and let's make the most of this.
That was spectacular, and I am inspired by David's vision. And I now want all of us to go and engage with this tool and ensure that every student in America has an opportunity to do the same. I want you to go today and read about the 10th Amendment and tell us what you think about the tool. I want our great teams to think about ways of distributing it more broadly. And I want to reinforce David's notion that this interactive constitution is not just for high school students, it is for students of all ages, because it is both a privilege and a duty of citizenship to educate ourselves about the Constitution. My constitutional hero is Justice Louis Brandeis, and in his beautiful opinion in the Whitney case from 1927, the most important statement about free speech in the 20th century, he talked about how public deliberation is a political duty and that people had an obligation to develop their faculties, invoking Jefferson's notion that we all have different faculties beginning with passion and emotion and culminating in reason. And these great men of the Enlightenment and of reason had faith that when citizens could engage with the text of the Constitution, educate themselves about it, they would become better people as well as better citizens. Brandeis said, if we would guide by the light of reason, we must let our minds be bold. And that's just what we're going to do. Thank you so much. Happy Constitution Day.
If the students from Roman Catholic could stand up here, we'll do a photo op. You guys, with you guys. How do I do that? I want to go to the homepage. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, they are.